talking more about someone who himself may have been victimized more than anything else.
How do you think your client was victimized?
Well, if you have an individual who is at advanced age and who's in a home, and from all reports that I've heard or seen so far, some of his, whether it was Social Security or other state benefits, are being.
Now, I think we're talking more about someone who himself may have been victimized more than anything else. Those are the words of a defense attorney. And they're not about a child, they're about a 73-year-old grandfather. A man found in a house with 16 grandchildren. A man who, according to his own lawyer, may not have been a perpetrator at all.
New charges for the 4 Siders family members found in a home with 16 children. We're looking at the charges related to those children who've been part of a secret investigation before and what could happen to their grandparents. As the father of the 16 children appears in court for the first time in weeks. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. The legal trouble for 4 members of the Siders family is far from over. For 2 of the 4, the legal jeopardy has gotten much worse. For the other 2, it's improved just slightly. These developments came after the Vinton County grand jury met and returned.
He may have been a prisoner. This is Hidden Case Files, and today, we are asking the question that no one else seems to be answering. Was Grandpa kept prisoner in his own grandkids' home? The case that shocked the nation started with a house on Elm Street. 16 children. Living conditions described by officials as squalid. Neglect so severe the county is seeking permanent custody of every single one of them. The parents, Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth, are facing everything from child endangering to sexual battery charges. The grandparents, Gary Sr. and Christina, were also arrested.
Gary Jr.'s parents, Gary Sr. and Christina Siders, still face child endangering charges, but the level of charges they face has been reduced. Both elder Siders had faced 16 counts of child endangering, felonies of the 2nd degree, when they were arrested, but now Gary Sr. faces 16 counts, 10 felonies of the 3rd degree, and 6 counts are now misdemeanors.
But here is where the story takes a turn. Because while the parents face the most serious charges, it is the grandfather who has become the most complicated figure in this entire tragedy. And the question of whether he was a villain or a victim is one that may ultimately define this case. The charges against Gary Sr. started at 16 counts of child endangering. Felonies of the 2nd degree. But when the grand jury returned its indictment, those charges were reduced.
The state of Ohio, they planned to take custody of the 9 Siders children. There were only 9 then. But removing them wasn't an option at that time, according to court records. So the court granted Children's Services request for protective supervision, which allowed a caseworker to help Gary Jr. and Elizabeth complete a case plan and keep their children. Gary Jr. and Elizabeth received a notice that stated, an adjudication of abuse, neglect, or dependency may result in an order of temporary custody. An order of temporary custody will cause the removal of a child from the legal custody of the parent until the court terminates the order of temporary custody or permanently divests them of their parental rights. When a complaint contains a prayer or request for permanent custody of a neglected or dependent child, the parents of said child are hereby notified that the granting of such permanent custody takes from the natural or adoptive parents all rights, duties, and obligations of a parent, including the right to consent to an adoption of the child, to inherit from the child, and the right of the child to inherit from the parent. Children's Services wasn't requesting permanent custody of the children back in 2020 and 2021, but they were on notice that it could be a possibility. Children's Services opened a case in 2020 after receiving a complaint from an online school that some of the children were supposed to be attending. Records showed the kids were barely logging on to online school and were essentially illiterate. The oldest at the time was 12. That case was closed and another was opened later that year after doctors found high levels of lead in 4 of the children's systems. They were living in this house on Honeysuckle in Cheshire at the time. There was a concern that one of the kids was being abused because the child had bruising on the back of her thigh. That case was closed.
He now faces a mix of third-degree felonies and misdemeanors. His attorney, Dorian Ballum, has been clear from the beginning.
We're talking more about someone who himself may have been victimized more than anything else.
How do you think your client was victimized?
Well, if you have an individual who is at advanced age and who's in a home, and from all reports that I've heard or seen so far, some of his, whether it was Social Security or other state benefits, are being used essentially to finance the renting of this home, utilities, food, what have you. And if this is an individual who himself is not all there or has significant mental decline or issues, it's entirely possible that he was unwillingly kept in this home without really any escape himself. It's hard to say. Again, this is all prognostication, but it's hard to say what.
He believes his client may have been victimized himself. Let's go back to the beginning. Children's Services was involved with this family years before the house on Elm Street was raided. Back in 2020, the state of Ohio planned to take custody of 9 Siders' children. That's right, there were only 9 then. The complaint came from an online school. The kids were barely logging on. They were essentially illiterate. The oldest was 12 years old.
Children, Gary Siders Sr. and Christina Siders, were living with the family and the kids. Only Christina Siders' name came up in the investigation. Gary Sr. and Christina, they looked pretty good in this photo posted on Facebook back in 2023, and even in this photo, believed to be from 2024, posted by one of their daughters on Facebook. Gary Sr.
That case was closed after the parents completed a case plan. Then another case was opened later that year after doctors found high levels of lead in 4 of the children's systems. There was a concern about abuse. A child had bruising on the back of her thigh. That case was closed too. The parents kept the children. And through all of this, Gary Sr. and Christina were living with the family. But here is where it gets interesting. Only Christina's name came up in that investigation. Gary Sr. was not part of it. The state had eyes on the mother and the father, not on Grandpa.
Kids. Only Christina Siders' name came up in the investigation. Gary Sr. and Christina, they looked pretty good in this photo posted on Facebook back in 2023, and even in this photo, believed to be from 2024, posted by one of their daughters on Facebook. Gary Sr. and Christina looked clean and healthy. It was taken outside of the house on Omer Street. So what happened in just a few years, or even a couple of years? Family members have claimed on social media that Gary Sr. and Christina didn't live like this, but apparently they were.
So what changed? How did this family go from living in a house where they looked clean and healthy, where social media photos show them looking well, to being found in the conditions that were discovered on Elm Street? There is a photo from 2023 that shows Gary Sr. and Christina outside the very same house they were arrested in. They look clean. They don't look like people living in squalor. There is even a photo from 2024 taken by one of their daughters where they look the same.
And they didn't live in squalor and they were in clean conditions. You know, your original question to me was, how could he potentially be a victim? Well, if you went from a person who had your faculties about you, and as they started to slip, the people around you in your life allowed the house that you had kept clean and tidy and kept yourself clean and tidy, and they allowed everything to slip into that condition.
And yet, when the house was raided, it was a different story. Gary Sr. was in a wheelchair. He did not appear to understand what was happening.
Dorian, let's start with you. I want your reaction to the indictment, the charges that your client specifically faces. He was facing 16 counts of child endangering. They were felonies of the second degree. Those have now, been reduced. There's a sprinkling of misdemeanors and felony charges in there. Your reaction?
My reaction is this is exactly what I told you would be happening. As I said from the outset, we still haven't received discovery yet. I have been contacted by the prosecutor's office. We have to just do some administrative stuff on the back end in order to make sure the discovery gets delivered properly. But, once again, from the complaint to the amended complaint, now to the indictment, the charges have been reduced in number and in severity for Mr. Siders Sr. This is a gentleman who still, of all...
His mental competency has been questioned by everyone from his attorney to the judge who raised his son's bail. His attorney, Dorian Ballum, told us that he has significant concerns about his client's mental faculties. He described him as a frail, fragile old man dealing with significant health issues, both mental and physical.
You said you're getting your information, a lot of it, from the community, social media. There's a photo out there that we've used several times where Gary Siders Sr. and his wife Christina, they look pretty good. It's from 2023, I believe. They look clean. They don't look dirty. There's even one with one of their daughters outside that home on Omer Street where they don't look bad at all. And I think that that's a more recent photo.
And here is the part that makes you stop and think. The prosecutor has confirmed that Gary Sr. and Christina were the only ones receiving government benefits in that house.
Dorian, I want to hit on the competency evaluation part of this. You said it's still in progress. Has that been conducted?
So it's my understanding that Mr. Siders was transported to the facility, building, etc., where the doctor would be evaluating him. I don't have any results of that. I don't have any reports. I don't have any indications how far along we are with that. Just so people are fully aware, it's not like someone... It's not like you're going in for a flu shot and they're like, while we're in here, let's do a strep test, and then 15 minutes later you have the results. This is the kind of thing where you get evaluated, it gets put in sort of the meat grinder of the evaluation process. Eventually a report gets spit out, and that's when we see it. Usually we're talking 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks after the actual evaluation takes place. So the fact that we don't have an evaluation or report yet is not too much of a surprise for me. I will say, though, that I do know Mr. Siders has continued to receive
Social Security, state benefits. All of it was coming into that home, and the attorney has suggested that money was being used to finance the renting of the home, the utilities, the food. So if a 73-year-old man with declining mental capacity is bringing in the only steady income to a house full of 16 children, who is really in control here? And who is taking advantage of whom? Let's talk to a legal expert about this. I want to bring in a former prosecutor and a defense attorney who have been following this case. What we know is that while Gary Sr.'s charges have been reduced, his son's charges have increased. Gary Jr. is now facing sexual battery and unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. His bail was raised from $300,000 to $550,000. The state is clearly focused on him and Elizabeth. But for Grandpa, there is another consideration. He is currently undergoing a competency evaluation
as well. So this is, again, the same. Just because an indictment was filed doesn't mean that he's not the same individual he was, weeks or months ago when we were talking. He's still a frail, fragile old man who is dealing with significant health issues, both mental health and physical health.
His attorney has deliberately limited his contact with him because he does not want to influence that evaluation. He wants it to be as pure as possible. He wants the doctors to see exactly what they see. And then, once that report is filed, they will know if he is competent to stand trial at all. Let's think about what that means. If a man is found not competent, if he is found not guilty by reason of insanity, it is essentially an admission that he was not aware of what was going on. It speaks directly to the question of whether he knew about the conditions in that house, about the abuse, about the neglect. And there is another layer to this. The attorney has pointed out that the state has not charged Gary Sr. with any complicity in the sexual abuse allegations. They have only charged him with child endangering. And the number of counts he faces is simply a reflection of the number of children in the home, not the number of acts. The prosecutor has made a very telling statement. He has said that Gary Sr. is not a threat to the public. He is free on a signature bond, wearing a GPS monitor. He is still getting treatment for a serious undisclosed medical condition. and the prosecutor admitted that if he had remained in jail, the cost of that treatment could have bankrupted the county. Think about that. The county, an entire county government, could have been bankrupted by the medical bills of this one frail old man. Whatever condition he has is massive. It is expensive. And it is debilitating. So we have a 73-year-old man. He is in mental decline. He is physically deteriorating. He may have been bringing in the only income. His health was so bad that keeping him in jail would have bankrupted a county. His own lawyer suggests he may have been kept in that home unwillingly, with no real escape. He asks the question, if you went from a person who had your faculties, and as they started to slip, the people around you allowed everything to fall into that condition, is that not someone who was victimized?
So right now, Gary Siders Sr., he's free on a signature bond. He's wearing a GPS monitor. The prosecutor has said he's not a threat to the public, but he is still getting treatment for a serious, undisclosed medical condition. That treatment...
The family members have spoken out. One told a West Virginia TV station that they were kept at arm's length from the family. The prosecutor has said the family was hiding Gary Jr. and Elizabeth's 16 children. But were they hiding Grandpa too? Or was he just another person trapped in that house? What happened in just a few years? How did a man who looked clean and healthy in 2023 become someone who didn't appear to understand what was happening in court? How did a woman who kept her house clean end up living in squalor? The answers to those questions might just be the key to understanding this entire case. And right now, the only person who can answer them may be the one who doesn't even know what is happening around him. This is Hidden Case Files, and we are going to be following this case every step of the way. Because stories like this, where the line between perpetrator and victim is so blurred, are the ones that deserve the deepest digging. If you want to stay with us as we uncover what really happened in that house on Elm Street, make sure you subscribe to Hidden Case Files. We will be back with updates as soon as that competency report comes in. As soon as we know who Grandpa really was, a perpetrator or a prisoner, we will find out.